finishes off a hat-trick.
The ball goes to Jamin Salmon. He runs into the Papua New Guinea powerhouse.
Wow, he is a beast.
It's the West Tigers podcast, episode number 297, and a little bit of a different cast this evening. Now, Eddie Otto is here, but Eddie, I'm going to give it to you a little bit because you said you weren't coming back to February 28, or I think it's 29 this year because it's a leap year, and yet you're here on January 15, so what's going on?
Well, not only January 15, Joel, but I think I was here for maybe 3 of the last 4 episodes, so I think I've been overworked in this rotation. So Declan, yourself, Gary, Steve, you've all got to lift your game. I'm like the David Klemmer. I just pump out a consistent performance every week at the moment.
Mr. Reliable, that's the new term for Eddie. Would I be a little bit cynical in saying that if the off-season had been a continuation of what we went through last year, we may not be seeing you this frequently?
It's perfectly true to say that, Joel. I think it's probably, I can't speak for other Tigers fans because not obviously all of them has to come on a podcast, but it gets a bit like that. I remember doing the podcast in season, and that's not so bad because, you know, you got games occasionally, the odd win to talk about or the odd positive, but just I was feeling a bit hopeless at the end of last season, and just unlike Gary, who looks forward to watch, he'd be happy to watch the West Tigers play 52 weeks of the year. I was happy when we got the bye in round 1 because I'm like, great, that gives me another week to get away from this. But then, bang, the big changes in December, the Luai signing. I'll be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit more optimistic, and maybe that has put me down for 4 of the last 5 podcasts. You're probably right.
And Declan is here as well. So, Declan, hello to you. The good news is, the news is, it'd be unfair to say good news, but the news is that Gary's not here. Gary's on holidays, so that may give...
You were right the first time, Joel. The good news.
It may give somebody else the chance to get a word in somewhere. Hello, Declan.
Yeah. Hello, boys. It's good to be here. But yeah, I heard that Gary's away in Thailand getting a hair transplant, so he might be out for a few weeks. I think he's in doubt for round 1, actually, so
right.
All the best to him. But yeah, I'm keen to get a word in this podcast.
He's getting it transplanted from his chin to his forehead. That would be an interesting look. All right, let's start with a little bit of tradition. One word to describe what it's like being a West Tigers fan right now. And we had a little bit of a chat about this before we came on. I'm going to see if we've all come up with the same word or words. Eddie, what have you got?
I'm going to go with light, Joel, because it's like you've been stuck in a dark cave or a dark tunnel and you think you can't get out alive, and you just suddenly you can see a little bit of light, and you don't know if that's an oncoming train to knock you out and you're dead, or whether it is saviour. So I'm just going to go with that little bit of light. I'm not sure which one it is, but there's light there.
Light at the end of the tunnel. Declan?
My 2 words is honeymoon period. I think that this is that sweet spot where there's been a big change in the off season, and they've got a new CEO. Everything seems to be going really well. They've made some really good new signings, particularly Luai, obviously. But it's just before the part of the season where we actually start playing, and people are probably going to start looking more about the actual wins. So right now, everyone's just kind of happy that we've made the changes we've tried to campaign for, but it's just before that period where we might be, have a little bit of a poor start. So it's just that sweet honeymoon period where I think everything the club puts out, everyone's pretty happy with.
Yeah, unbeaten in 2024. It's a pretty good place to be. My words, 2 words, cautiously optimistic, which I think encapsulates all of what we're talking about. An optimistic West Tigers fan. We are optimistic every now and then. But one thing I will say, just diverting slightly, I've had a little bit of a rethink about my strategy towards winning sports teams. And what really, I've been watching the Welcome to Wrexham documentary. I don't know if you guys have seen that, where Ryan Reynolds and another guy whose name I can't remember from TV. They decided to buy Wrexham, which is a football team in the UK, which was down in the almost semi-professional league that tumbled out from the big time right down the ladder and really struggling. And when they first got there, all of the fans were saying it's because it's Wrexham, we're unlucky, we're this, we're that. But they added better players, and as they added better players, the team and the club got better. So my philosophy's changed a little bit. I'm sick of hearing about, West Tigers this and West Tigers that. If you're going to be a good football team, you've just got to get the best players. You've got to have better players. I don't think there's a huge differentiation between us and the other clubs in the NRL, other than the fact that they have managed to get better players. And I think that's what I'm more optimistic about is we've added and we are adding some class in. So, yeah, I know we've been unlucky and I know we're West Tigers this and West Tigers that, but you just put good players in that team and we'll be one of those clubs. I know it's very simplistic, but Eddie, what do you think?
Well, I mean, there's nothing unlucky about, missing the top 8 12 years in a row. I think what you're talking about is almost like a change of mentality. We shouldn't feel poor us every year.
Exactly.
We got our best players out injured. You know what? Melbourne have a lot of injuries as well, and they tend to make the top 4 every year. So I think with Shane Richardson, you're going to get that change of mentality. He's already made some big changes in the first few weeks. Jerome Luai is another big personality who I'm sure is not going to come here and say, well, I'm happy to run 12th next year because that's an improvement when you ran last. They've got the mentality of winners. So bringing more people who are used to winning into the club, I don't think it's a bad thing.
Declan, have you watched that series? You being a football fan?
I can't say I've seen little bits and pieces of it, and yeah, it's definitely on the to watch list. Like seeing one of those football teams rise up the English football ladder in the different divisions. But yeah, I think it's really interesting because in a sport like football, as you kind of grow up the ladder, you can kind of afford better players. But in the NRL, you kind of need to develop them because the talent pool is nowhere near as big as in English football. So yeah, I agree with you, Joe. I think at the end of the day, the difference in the 17s between Penrith and the Tigers in the past few years has been really noticeable. I think that the $1 million question is how do you get that kind of squad though? And I think Shane Richardson highlighted that you do need to develop those players because you can't just sign everyone on $1.2 million like Jerome Luai. You kind of have to have the people coming into the squad who are on those kind of pennies so that your squad is well balanced. And I think a lot of the time in the last few years we've had players performing under their contract value. But in actuality, I think what you need is you actually need the majority of the squad playing above their contract value if you're going to win a competition. And I just think that we've just really been nowhere near that in the last few years. And hopefully Luai is that kind of the cream of the crop where we can bring in, pay a little bit more than his market value perhaps, but then we bring these younger players that are performing well above their contract value. And that's how I think we'll make the 8 and hopefully push for a premiership in the not too distant future.
I think that 2 of the 3 almost dynasties, Joel, have been, Melbourne, Penrith and the Roosters. And, correct me if I'm wrong, but Melbourne and Penrith, pretty much their superstars, they brought them through. Even guys like Cam Smith, Billy Slater, they started from wherever, Queensland Cup or whatever. And the Roosters is probably the only outlier in that they do buy the odd big name, which makes a big difference. But they also brought some of their stars through. So there's no excuse in that regard, is there? Obviously, it helps. It hinders us being at the bottom of the table the last 2 years to try and attract big names. But there's no reason why you can't produce your own big names.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a big part of success comes from being able to identify the right people at those younger ages. So not just developing them, but finding and cherry-picking people out of other people's junior leagues as well that may be behind other players at other clubs and investing in them and getting them when they're just about ready to go. Declan?
Yeah, it's not only developing them, it's keeping them and selling them the vision of the club that they're going to be successful here. I mean, if you talk about the top juniors from the 2010s, you'd have to say Moses, Tedesco and Brooks. Those guys were all up there in terms of really high quality up and coming players. Then 2 out of the 3 left because we couldn't convince them that their best interest was to stay at the club because that's what was going to make them successful in their careers. Yeah, so hopefully someone like Jerome Luai coming in can kind of show people, even like Stefano, that, the club, it's on the up, they should re-sign here or they should commit to the West Tigers because that's how they're going to play their best footy and future success is going to lie here as opposed to previous seasons.
Eddie, Shane Richardson, when you think about players negotiating with the club and being sold the vision of the club, you would think anecdotally that having a Shane Richardson there is going to make it an easier sell, given everybody knows that here's a guy that took South from nothing, got him to the premiership, did similar with Cronulla, same with Penrith. Like, he's a proven winner. I think that's a real advantage to have somebody who's got that proven winning track record, especially when we've got a coach that's still making his name. How important is it that we hang on to Shane Richardson as long as possible?
I'd love him to stay 3 or 5 years, Joel. And like you said, it's you can't buy that sort of experience he's had, which is clubs, turning him around from the bottom of the table. And it wasn't necessarily, Joel, that I would be optimistic that he could be the difference in bringing in big plays in the first couple of years. But I noticed some of the quotes that he said, and you might like to comment on this, but he sort of almost, I think he said something about just the staff, saying we've got a lot of good people here, but almost like they're not very effective. So it's like if you've been under a boss and a regime for a few years where you're either going through the motions or you're not, your skills aren't being directed the right way, I think that makes not as much difference as getting a big player, but just little things like that. I mean, organisations he were at, he didn't sign Greg Inglis in the first 2 years he was at South, but he brought in some guys, I think maybe earlier, that set the foundations up for the club, and they looked like a well-run club. So 5 or 6 years into his reign, hopefully it doesn't take that long here, they were able to attract a Russell Crowe and then a Greg Inglis, and then it was just a flow-on effect. But I think he moulded the structure of the club, if you know what I mean, just the people inside the building, whether it be the board, the football, head of football, everything flowing in the right direction, and then your playing roster flows on from that.
Yeah, well, I mean, speaking from our own experience and hopefully not speaking out of place, but a lot of the frustration and a lot of the reason why we got to the point where, and credit where credit's due to Steve, where we came up with the idea, or we pushed through with the idea of the petition calling for the review, was our experiences dealing with the club on a corporate level. It wasn't just about the fact of two wooden spoons. There was a lot of things, a lot of factors that went into that decision to try and aim for that change. And I think what Richardson's saying is very validating. I think he's saying that there's aspects of the club that need some attention, that need some work, and I don't think there's a better man in the game to implement those changes and see them through than Shane Richardson. He'd be loving it. He'd be loving every minute of this to find a West Tigers in this position and be given the keys and the ability to be able to mould it. I think he would be relishing every moment of it, Eddie.
Well, that's the thing. He's going to mould it in his. He's going to be driven. And I remember his opening press conference. He said, "You can't be distracted by the media. You can't be distracted by getting flogged one weekend. You need to stick to your beliefs." And I think, Joel, that was one of your main criticisms of the past regime. It was just a constant change of philosophy. It was like, oh, we're going back to Tim Sheens. Oh, we're going to bring back, it just seemed like it changed every 6 months, and they were trying their best, but they were just chasing their tail constantly. They would never have the stubbornness or the experience to stick with a plan and follow through. Yeah,
I think experience is the word. I think that it's not the type of job where you can learn too much in the seat. You've got to bring a certain amount of experience in if you're going to hit the ground running and have the strength to be able to stick with your philosophies and your proven strategies to get there. And the previous admin probably didn't have that as much as we would like, and the proof of the pudding was in the eating after all. Moving on from that and getting back into that cautiously optimistic place, the big news, the main thing that we were going to talk about on this podcast is the deal that's seen Shawn Blore go to Melbourne and Justin Olam coming our way. Gary not overly enthusiastic about Olam after the first year, but I think if he gets back to form, I think Justin Olam's a guy that could make a significant difference to the club. And to the team. I've got some quotes here from the West Tigers podcast forum. We'll run through those shortly, some different opinions on the deal. Let's start with who's departing. Declan, Shawn Blore, 33 games in 4 years, seemed like a good guy, seemed like a bit of a club man. But I'm not, and I can see the potential, but I'm not fussed about losing him. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but yeah, I'm not concerned.
Yeah, I mean, I think we interviewed him for the Ambush one time, and I got to meet him. Yeah, he's a really nice guy. He speaks really well. You can tell he wears his heart on his sleeve, and I think he is like one of those people that you do want around your club because he just seems like a really good person. In terms of on the footy field, yeah, I think his injuries and his injury history is a little bit of a red flag. But I do still have stock in Shawn Bloor. I think if he can stay on the field and play and become a little bit more durable, I do think that he is an NRL player. And in the Melbourne Storm system, I mean, they're definitely going to get, like, whatever potential he has, Craig Bellamy is probably going to get the most out of, which makes me a little bit nervous from a West Tigers perspective, because although, yes, like, we do really need someone like Justin Olam, we do need outside backs, particularly at that left centre position. I don't really see a lot of, like, times where, you know, you let go of like a 23-year-old and then we get a 30-year-old, and then we look back in 5 years and say, well, I think that the team that got the older player won the trade. But in saying that, I think that someone that everyone isn't really talking about is we did sign Samuel Afainu, who's a very similar mode of player to Shawn Bloor. He is in the back row right now, but he can also play middle. So I do believe that he's going to probably take the kind of position that Shawn Bloor had in the squad. So if he turns out to be an absolute star and we get Olam as well, then it's a win-win for us. But then I think that if he's not the player that we hoped he'd be, then I think we might look at the Shawn Bloor situation and might live to regret it. So it's up in the air at the moment. But Benji did address a need of concern in the outside backs for us, which is why I'm hoping this will be a good deal for us.
Yeah, and Fainu, of course, has some first-grade experience. I think he debuted against us, didn't he? He got into that push and shove with Wakeham. That was Samuel Fainu. So he's a player I'm looking forward to seeing play this year. Just one more on Shawn Bloor, Eddie. In the future, do you think Melbourne will play him as a middle? Do you think he's an edge player? What do you think? He's never... A lot of people are saying he's a middle, but I didn't quite see that myself.
Well, one thing about Melbourne is they will have a plan. I don't know what the plan is. I'd say it's probably to be on an edge. I think that's where they'd see him as a strike weapon. There's no doubt that's why they've probably fallen off being a title team the last 3 years, is their forwards haven't been as powerful as some of the big sides. Like Penrith and Brisbane last year, their forwards were nowhere near a match. So I know you don't probably rate Shawn Bloor maybe as highly as Gary and maybe myself and Declan. Joel, is that just sort of because of the 33 games in 4 years, or were there aspects of his game where you thought he could drift in and out of games?
Yeah, it could drift in and out of games. Look, it's not to say that I'm not a fan of his. Am I concerned about losing him? Not really. We have depth in that position in the back row, and he has not been consistently able to contribute to the team over that time. I see the potential there, but not, as I say, not overly concerned about losing him. A lot of that is primarily because I think he's a little bit like some other players. Maybe you could point to Adam Doueihi, where you're just not exactly sure what part of the game he excels in, what is his best position, and the ability to be able to do it week in and week out. Still, the jury is out. Declan?
Yeah, I think that he's just, it's what you said, Joe. I think he's just in that classic kind of middle ground where he might not be athletic enough to play in the back row, in the second row position. That could be because of his injuries. Maybe if he puts a few runs on the board, that'll come back, because he was a great back rower coming through. And then I also think that he needs to work on his motor if he was to be a middle forward, because I saw a lot of games last year where he'd come on and his initial impact would be really, really good. But then after a few runs or a few tackles, you could see him fatiguing. So, yeah, I think that, like, everyone talks about the Melbourne system and how it's like a dead set certainty that they're going to get the best out of him. But I do think there are genuine things in his game that he does need to improve on. But he is still quite young, and he's been unlucky with injuries, and he is a really good person. Like, from the conversation I had with him, so I do wish him nothing but the best for his time in Melbourne.
a couple of comments on Blore. Tiger Benny B on the West Tigers podcast forum said Blore will be playing in the Queensland Cup. We'll be playing for the East Tigers in the Queensland Cup. Harsh, Tiger Benny B. And Jedi Tiger said Blore is replaceable in a position we have plenty of depth in. So you mentioned Fainu. There's another couple of back rowers that are pushing up. Fayagatu, I think, is another one as well, Declan. You would presume Bateman and Papali will be the starting second rowers. What do we got to look forward? I mean, Kit Leilili, he looked very promising as well. What are our back row stocks looking like, do you think?
Yeah, so in terms of Meadows, I think we're really well stocked in terms of junior prospects. I think that was a big reason why Richardson pulled out of the Adam Fanua-Blake deal. Because there's no doubt that Fanua-Blake's a quality player. But I think, throwing $1 million at a prop like that when we do have young players. And, obviously there's no guarantee that these guys are going to be stars, but I think that they do look pretty good. So you've got Jordan Miller, who's the big prop, made Australian Schoolboys last year. I think he's an absolute gun. If he can get his conditioning right, I think he'll be a really, really good player for us. And then Kit Leilili was the Harold Nats captain when we won 2 years ago, so he's another really good player. I think he'll eventually be a ball-playing 13. I think that's his best position. Obviously, he's already debuted, and I thought he looked pretty good in that stint, so hopefully he gets some more game time this year. Fogodu is also a middle player, so maybe not an edge. Maybe he might transition to that edge spot into first grade, but they're kind of all middles at the moment. In terms of actual back rowers, I think the plan was always to move Lachlan Galvin into that back row spot, but then last year he had that really good schoolboy season, so I think that might have changed the plans, because it seems like they're considering him more as a six now as opposed to a back rower, so we'll have to see about that. But I think, besides Bateman and Papali, I think that the two other guys that I think are going to be gunning for those spots, I think one is going to be Kapoa, and then the other one is going to be Samuel Fainu. And then besides that, we'll just have to see if anyone comes from behind the pack to land one of those spots.
I thought that was really interesting that Shane Richardson described Lachlan Galvin as a future superstar. That's a pretty big rap to put on a guy that's, may play first grade this year, but that goes to show. And all of a sudden, if we're looking at our halves, we seem to be overstocked. But let's not get off track there. I got just one more thing in regards to all that. The guy that I thought was probably our most consistent forward last year, Fanua Pole. Do you see him being in the prop rotation this year? Do you think they'll play him at lock? I was really impressed last year.
I would like to see him. I would like to see him move back to the bench. I think that he's a better prop than he is at 13. In fact, I don't really think he really played much 13. I think we just kind of played more with three props in the field rather than that kind of that kind of new age Isaiah Yeo 13 that kind of tips the ball to the halves off first receiver. So I would really like to see Fanua Pole just move to the bench and then break his way into that team. I'm hoping that he'll replace David Clemmer, because it looks like the club might be looking to move him on by all reports at the end of this season. So I would like to see Fanua Pole pushing for that starting spot, but from the bench. And then in terms of lock, I'm not really sure at the moment. I think that's really up for grabs. I thought we looked pretty good with John Bateman at 13 in attack, but the problem was he just looked really burnt out because he would have to make 40 and 50 tackles every week, and he just didn't look like his body was up to it towards the end of the season. So I think there's some real dilemmas. And you've got Justin Manamu as well, who's untested in that position. So I think 13 more than prop is probably going to be a big question of concern going into this season.
There's a lot of questions to be answered in the trials, isn't there, Eddie? It's exciting when you've got a group of players that are unknown and we don't exactly know which way the club's thinking. Sullivan comes to mind, and Fainu, and it's probably one of the most interesting trial periods that we've had for quite a while at the West Tigers, I would think. Are you looking forward to seeing that? It's not the round one team, unfortunately, but that round two team. Are you expecting a lot of sort of shocks and surprises and twists and turns?
I think it's probably a little bit like when Ivan Cleary coaches. I remember in 2018, I think he said, whoever stands out in the preseason might get the jump. It's not like there's 11 guys you can lock in, particularly the back line and the halves. The forward pack, you could probably get close to naming it now. Might be one or two sort of younger guys that push up from a bench to a potential starting role, maybe at lock or something like that. But that back line, you'd probably say only Jareen Buller's probably the only lock absolute lockdown certainty to start at fullback, whereas the 2 centre spots and 2 winger spots, there's competition there. I wouldn't say there's a huge amount of known quality or form there at the moment. And the halves, I'm excited about the halves because, last year, I know we've lost Luke Brooks, but, I'm a bit like you, Joel. I was a bit over Luke Brooks, and that's nothing against him. I just thought it wasn't working for both parties, even though he had a pretty good year last year. And I'm just looking forward to seeing who steps up and owns that. I was intrigued by that Richardson comment because he also, on the back end of mentioning Galvin as a potential superstar, he said Fainu's going to be a superstar as well.
Yeah.
So it pricked my attention a little bit. I thought, how would you feel at the moment if you're Sullivan or if you're Caesar? And there were, I think, rumours last week. Gary said that Fainu was training with the first team at 5'8" at training with Caesar at halfback. So who knows? It's only January, but you usually get a good indication. Like sometimes if you're playing in that first trial, it probably means you're with the second team. And if you're playing in the last trial, this probably means you're a chance to start in round 1. That's how they usually structure it.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that was the reports online that like people who saw training were seeing that Sullivan was playing in the second team, which I think is, if you're him, this is probably the biggest season of your career because, you came up with the Dragons and like you couldn't really nail down a spot there, and he's come to the Tigers for opportunity. And like for him, if he doesn't make the team, then I think that's a big worry for him, and it's probably a bit of a concern for the Tigers as well because if he's not good enough to make the starting team, then you're probably going to have to rely on someone like Galvin or Latu Fainu, and they're both rookies, and we kind of know like no matter how good the rookie is, they're going to eventually hit that rookie wall. It happened with June Bula last year, and he was amazing for us. So yeah, it's a little bit of a concern if Sullivan's not pushing for a start for round 1 because you just assume that Caesar's going to be the other half to kind of guide them through it, like probably at least the start of the season.
Yeah, a lot of questions to be answered. It will be really fascinating to see how all that pans out. Justin Olam, 30-year-old, 3-year deal, subsidised by the Storm for a couple of years. Frullen says Olam is exactly what we need at this club. He'll bring confidence to the team, and he's easily our best centre. I'm excited about seeing Justin Olam running around for the West Tigers, and I'm excited to see what he can do on that left edge with Papali and whoever we select on that wing. We often, Eddie, have spoken about the West Tigers not being respected, about not being, sometimes being a bit of a walkover, but if you've got a guy like Justin Olam over on that edge, it changes the way that the opposition plays because he does some damage.
Yeah, he's got to have some mates though, and I like the picture of having. I know Luai's not coming this year, but the picture of having some almost like real dogs, I could call them, like Luai and Olam, guys that just will get in your face and you won't be physically intimidated. We've already got forwards like that, but what I want to know, Joel, is what are Melbourne hiding from us? Like seriously, why are they giving up someone who's got 3 years left on their contract? There's something they're not telling us. I'm not saying it's going to be as bad as what happened to St George Illawarra with that Ronald Volkman, and you find out he's all of a sudden he's buggered and he's out for 12 months. But there's got to be something they're not telling us. I don't know if it's just the lack of form showed on the field when he played last year. I just worry when I look at that age, 30 years, that the physicality he played with. He was, I think, Dally M Centre of the Year in 2021. Maybe it's taken its toll. Maybe it's issues off the field. No one knows. But I'm just wary of doing business with a club like Melbourne Storm, who are generally very smart operators.
You're not questioning the Melbourne Storm's integrity, are you? Surely not.
I'm always questioning club integrity. Everyone's what's the saying? If you're not cheating, you're not trying. So Melbourne Storm, they wouldn't be trying to do us any favours with this trade. But there are situations where, both teams win a trade. We need outside backs. They need forwards. So there's not just a situation where it's going to be, Melbourne won or West Tigers won the trade. Sometimes both sides could benefit. They probably did long term, even though they didn't give us we didn't give them someone in return for Harry Grant. We developed him to a point where he was really ready to go when he got back to Melbourne. So it seems the clubs have some sort of connection there. I don't know if I'm drawing too big a bow there, but Declan, are you worried about doing business with a club like Melbourne?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, they're just such shrewd operators, aren't they? And especially under the last administration, I would have been really worried because, they did make some strange decisions, and we were a little bit desperate for the outside backs to be filled. But I think with Richardson there, I know we've said that a few times since he's come on, but I just feel a little bit more confident that if he's all right with the deal, then it can't be that bad for us. And I think everyone remembers that like this was a few months ago that it first came up as a rumour, and then it seemed like negotiations really stalled for a moment in time. So I'd like to think that was hopefully us just kind of putting our foot in the sand in terms of how much money Melbourne were going to pay or something of that nature. And then I think that part of it as well is that there's a lot of rumours that it wasn't so much that Olam wanted to leave the Storm. I think it was that the Storm, as Eddie said, wanted to get out of Olam, and I think that's what's pushed maybe Melbourne to come to the table a little bit at this point to chip in a little bit more. So hopefully with Richardson there, we've got a good deal. And I think Steve also hit the nail on the head last podcast. I think the Tigers only really want him for like this season, maybe next season, and they just have to carry the third year because that's how long he's contracted to Melbourne. So I think the next 2 years, I think it'll be all right, but I think that third year it might be a bit. I'm not sure how it's going to look.
I was just trying to think of like a analogy, Joel. It's almost like, you get the gift voucher or whatever, or maybe just one of those cruises that you go on. It all sounds wonderful, but I'm sure, Joel, you check what's in the fine print and all the details. That's what I'm sort of worried. What are Melbourne hiding in the fine print of Justin Olam in 2024?
Well, I mean, you would think that it wouldn't be physical because he's had a physical. So are you, maybe alluding to an attitude issue, do you think? Or
I just looked at Melbourne Storm's best lineup potentially for 2024, and I got this off Fox Sports, so it's probably not very reputable, but anyway. And their centres were Marion Sevi, Remus Smith, and potentially Nick Meaney. So he's not getting pushed out for any young superstar. Yep. So that's the concern I have. Melbourne aren't known for having, like Justin Olam was a very reliable, good centre for 5 or 6 years, and then 12 months later, all of a sudden, they're getting rid of him, Declan. Maybe it's just because they don't think they can compete in the forwards and it's a trade they had to make, but that worries me a bit. Yeah,
I think that, like as you said, he played really tough footy for a pretty long period of time, and I think that catches up with you. And he did just turn 30. Not a lot of outside backs, continue to play really high-quality footy after the age of 30. They do lose that athleticism. But, yeah, I think on the face of it, it is something that we need. Like, we need someone with his carry to start our sets. It's just absolutely crucial in the NRL for your outside backs to get in, do the dirty work. And that, like, him and Junior Tupou and Bullard are going to be really good for that. But, yeah, I agree with you, Eddie. I just think that, there is... I feel like there's something because they wouldn't just get rid of him for no reason. And plus, they were going to sign Bloor anyway. So, they could have just waited for a year if they really wanted to keep all of them. So, yeah, I think there's probably... I think they were probably done with him more than he was done with them, is what I'm trying to say.
Tiger Town SFS says Olam's a great signing that adds experience. HSV Jones says he'll add experience and aggression. He'd be short odds to be one of the starting centres in round one, you would think. Who, without going into too much detail, maybe even just their surname, who will partner him in the centres in that round 2 game?
I'd like to think Brent Naden, Joel, because I rate him as a talent, but I don't know where his head's at. So if he's at his very best, I'd love to say Brent Naden, but probably more likely be Stafford Toa.
Yeah, I'm going to go Stafford Toa as well.
All right, yeah, so Stafford Toa and Brent Naden, and they're probably the educated guesses. I'll just throw back, Eddie, Brent Naden. I hope it's Naden. Like you, I'm a bit of a fan, but so far, would you say he's in the dud category? Has he been a dud purchase?
Yeah, he has, and that's because if I didn't rate him as a player, I'd just say, well, I don't have any expectations. But I think it was one of those early season game against Canterbury, maybe even one of the trials, and he looked like the best centre on the field. And then his head was a pineapple, turned into a pineapple against Penrith, and he got sin bin, and then he got suspended, and then I think he had an injury, to be fair, at the end of the year, but. He looks like a sort of larrikin, sort of a good person to be around the club, but whether he can maintain his focus, and that's been an issue throughout his career because he's been moved on by a couple of clubs. So this is probably last chance saloon. I know he's on contract, I think, for another year after this, which was a bit questionable at the time, how long we signed him for, given his track record. But I'd say this is last chance saloon this year for him as a first grader.
If we wanted to be facetious, we could say the X factor in all of this is your friend Dane Laurie's gone back to Penrith. So maybe Dane Laurie was a bad influence on him. So let's hope that Brent Naden's ready to stand up and be counted this year.
Yeah, I won't be following Dane's Instagram this year, Joel, because he's a Penrith, so I won't be reporting all the silly stuff he puts out there. I've blocked him or whatever that word is. I'm not. He's off my friends list, or not that I know him.
He's barred. It's going to be weird to see him in a Penrith. No, wait a minute. No, it's not. Let's flip it around, Eddie. You are being handed the baton. You are now the host of the West Tigers podcast.
I just thought we'd, given it's a little bit of a quiet time of year, I'd just do another little edition of buy, sell and hold. So I've got 9 questions, boys, and you're only allowed 1 hold. So keep your hold up your sleeve, maybe. Joel, the other big news I think that broke maybe after our last podcast, I can't quite remember, is Scott Fulton's been moved on. My question to you is, buy, sell or hold, Scott Fulton will not be missed.
Yes, I'll buy that. Do I need to?
Why, John? Yeah, I mean, you. I can't remember if it was you or Gary or Steve. It was very quizzical at the time. I was probably willing to give it a chance, but the dysfunction of it showed straight away, didn't it? Like management hiring a person that the coaches didn't know about. It was just whether he's a good recruiter or what. It was or not. It was just dysfunctional.
It was dysfunctional, especially because the situation at the time was we had Warren McDonald, who's Tim Sheens' right-hand man, as the recruitment manager. So it was very, very messy. And based on the recommendation of Ray Hadley, it was just all... that was that may have been the final sort of thing as well, that the board may have got jack of how the club was being run, and that may have been one of the things that tipped them towards supporting our review. Declan?
Yeah, I think it just got really messy towards the end, because not only was... the coaching staff wasn't consulted, but then it seemed to just pile out onto the media, because you would hear Benji wanted Aidan Caesar, and then Fulton wanted who was it, Jack Cogger, and then Benji's chasing Luai, and then Scott Fulton, he's chasing Adam Fanua-Blake. So yeah, it just seemed like they're kind of both going in different directions. It wasn't really that unison that you absolutely need for a footy team to be successful, and I think they've done the right thing, and I think they've backed the coach, as any good organisation should, because I don't ever remember anyone ever making such a big song and dance about what a head of recruitment of an NRL team thinks. Usually they should just be doing what the coach wants, but it just seemed like he that kind of relationship where he kind of thought he had more power than he probably should have. But yeah, I think that the club has done the right thing in backing the coach, because that person is ultimately the one who's accountable, because they have to wear the wins and losses. So you need to do everything you can to support them, which I think Richardson has done with Benji. Not
a buy, sell and hold, Joel, but do you think that that they put together I'm not sure if it's a short-term interim committee, but Shane Richardson, Benji, I think Matt Betsy was going to be the looking after that. Do you think that's a position that needs to be filled full-time in the short term, or do you think they could get by with the head coach and Richardson doing most of the pulling power there?
There's something to be said about having less voices when you're negotiating with a manager and a player and a player's family. Like if you're hearing too many messages from too many people, I don't think that would necessarily be an advantage. I don't know Benji's coaching style. He's still developing it, no doubt, at this stage. But I would think with John Morris there and his other lieutenants that I wouldn't be surprised if Benji's not as hands-on as maybe some other people when it comes to coaching. I wouldn't be surprised if he's sort of floating more between the admin and the coaching side of things and delegating off to his people on the training paddock. I know that goes against his putting the training shirt on and showing them how to do it. But I think Benji's going to be a different kind of coach. And I wouldn't be surprised if we don't expand that in any great rush. I think Shane Richardson, Benji to chime in, and Matt Betsy, who's by all accounts seems a very good operator, might be just a good little trio to get the job done. I mean, they got Luai.
True. Declan, next one for you. I'll get Joel's opinion as well, because this is an interesting one. I was going to call it the 05 old boys, but I'll reframe it. I'll say the coaching staff's lack of experience. So I'm talking about Benji, Robbie Farah and Chris Hyington are now assistant coaches to the NRL team. We know John Morris is on there as well. And then you've got, I think, Scando and Pat Richards work for the club. I'm not sure if they do so with the first team in terms of coaching, but will that coaching team be found out for their lack of experience this year? Buy, sell, or hold?
I'm going to sell that just purely because I think that John Morris being there is just really crucial. I think he did a really good job with that Cronulla team when he was the head coach, and like he does have that background in coaching. He did have that traditional pathway up to first grade. If he wasn't there, I'd be very worried. But I think that him being there, and by all accounts, him being a very X's and O's kind of coach, with who'll probably draw up the game plan and the strategy, I think him being there makes me less worried that the coaching staff is going to be found out. Like, but you know, like we might have like dry spells, we might go through losing streaks, but I think that the coaching staff at the moment looks pretty good because John Morris is there. Then hopefully Benji can sprinkle some of that magic on top that we saw in the Celebrity Apprentice last year.
Oh, but Joel, if you were looking at just through a neutral's eyes or a skeptic's eyes, as I might be, you'd surely be looking at that coaching staff and going, this is the most inexperienced coaching staff in the history of an NRL side. You've got Benji and Robbie who've done 1 year in total. I think Chris Hyington's done 1 year in total. And then obviously you have John Morris. So I do think that's a massive question mark. Even though I love those guys, I think it is.
I think what matters more, or may matter just as much, aside from experiences, is how the team reacts to you, how the team interacts with you. When you look at Michael Maguire, when he was the coach of the West Tigers, it got very messy in that last couple of years with lots of talk about players going not listening and players not being on the bus, for want of a better term. I can't remember what the actual term was. We had to walk on eggshells with him, that kind of thing. I mean, we're talking about NRL players. I mean, they're not under 10s. How much coaching do they really need? What the most important thing is what that interaction between the coaches and the players is. And as Declan said, you know, John Morris is there for strategy, and Robbie and Benji are no numbskulls. They've been around the game a long time, so I'm not overly fussed about it. Maybe one more experienced assistant would have been good, but it's what we've got, and I'm not overly concerned. It's not keeping me up at night.
Yeah, I think that it's not so much like the tactics as well as it's also the man managing approach. And if you look at, like, I know it's different because it's Origin, but you look at someone like Billy Slater, you know, Queensland legend, didn't have much experience like in the coaching department, but you know, all those guys grew up watching Billy Slater like perform in that Origin arena, and like to them, you know, he'd be the man, and you would kind of like listen to everything he said with a notepad. You just take everything in, and I think it's similar to Benji Marshall with this current group, especially the younger players. Like, I just think that you would have such respect for them that maybe that could make up for the lack of experience, because at the end of the day, as Joe said, I think that, you know, tactics and stuff, that's all well and good, but I think that it's just how you motivate the team week in, week out. I think that's also just as important as the X's and O's of it.
And don't forget, last year we had a coach who won 4 premierships and coached 700 or so first-grade games and steered us to the wooden spoon. So I don't know. As I say, let's just give it a chance and see what happens.
Joel, you know I like the circus emoji. My question is, the Dragons have officially replaced the Tigers as the circus club of the NRL.
I hope so. I'm cautiously optimistic that that's the case.
I think buy is the right word, Joel.
I think I will buy that. They seem to be in all sorts of trouble, the poor old Dragons, and I've got to say I feel a bit sorry for their fans. I don't, you know, it's not fun.
I don't feel sorry for them, Declan. I mean, seriously, if that happened, like that just seemed, I don't know if the Warriors may be slightly to blame, but that just seems so unprofessional, bringing a player in and then you find out his actual shoulder is confetti and he can't play for a whole year.
Yeah, I think that at the moment it's kind of hard to assign blame because everyone just seems to be pointing the finger at everyone else. I do think the Dragons probably shouldn't have had him training, you know, if the contract wasn't actually completed, because then, you know, you're not insured if you get injured because there's no contract. And I do really feel sorry for him, because at the end of the day, I think he's the biggest loser out of this because he's without a contract. They need to look at the other stuff as well, and they let go of Sullivan. They signed Kyle Flanagan. You know, if Ben Hunt, you know, has another bad year where he wants out, he could be the only. Kyle Flanagan could be the starting 7 next year, and you know, and that's just terrible for everyone. So yeah, I definitely hope that they do take Armano as the basket case club of the NRL. But yeah, I do feel a little bit baffled as well.
What will be interesting to watch, Eddie, is have we set a precedent where disillusioned and disenchanted and disenfranchised fans of other clubs will launch review petitions? Yeah,
there were a lot of disses there, Joel. So maybe you've given some people some ideas.
That's right. They can employ me as a consultant if they like.
Next one, Declan. John Bateman's commitment to the club long term should be a question mark. Buy, sell, or hold.
I'm going to sell that because I would have held it, but Steve gave me a little bit of stick last week or last time we did this for being on the fence with everything. I just think that he's one of those guys that, yes, it's annoying that he hasn't had a full preseason with us again for the second year in a row. But when he's on the field, I don't think you can really question his commitment. Yes, it's annoying. He was in England for a little bit far. But the time was a little bit too long for me. You'd love to see him in the preseason just ripping in. As Benji said, whoever trains the hardest is going to get that first crack. If you're someone like AJ Kapoa and you're busting your ass the entire preseason, and then someone like Bateman comes towards the end of January and starts preseason, that could be perceived as annoying. But I just think that when he's on the field, you can just tell he's 100% committed. So that's why I'm going to sell that one.
I just think, Joel, I don't know the full situation. I know senior pros are entitled to more time, and he did play in that test series, I think, England versus Tonga, so he was probably entitled until Christmas. But then I read stuff that he hasn't been training or he's back doing light duties. And I just remember last year, I know he played hard, but I thought the fact he had no preseason last year, and I don't know if that was all his fault, trying to get the visa or whatever to get over here, but I think it caught up with him in the end. I thought he looked knackered the last 8 or 10 weeks.
Yeah, it might be something you can get away with more when you're 25 or 26 and maybe not so much when you get a little bit older. But I will sell it for the fact that, as Declan said, he was a top contributor and he did try very hard last year. But I would sell it for the fact that there are children involved. So maybe if it's a case that we have to make some sort of accommodations there given his family situation.
All right, boys, we'll do 2 more. Declan, membership will be over 25,000 this year. I don't know the numbers last year, Declan, but I'm sure they kept sprouting. They reached 20K the last few years. I don't know if that was bringing in one-game packages halfway through the year that your dog could sign up for or whatever, but you'd think memberships would be higher, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I'm going to sell that just purely because I think that hopefully when Jerome Luai comes in 2025, I think that's when we might see a big increase in the memberships because I think the club becomes a lot more marketable. I think you've got Dream Bulla has got another year where hopefully he takes a leap into that top echelons of fullbacks, and then Jerome Luai coming the marquee player. I hope that's the kind of point where the memberships spike. But hopefully this year a lot of people sign up. We've heard a lot of stuff online about people renewing their membership, so hopefully there's some truth to that.
What are you doing in your membership, Joel? Is it still in the microwave like it has been the last few years, or is it back out and ready to go?
It's ready to go. I've got the membership for 2024, so I've come back, which leads me to the point that where I believe we are. I think we're back to zero. I think we're back to square one, if you know what I mean. In that the disenfranchised West Tigers fans that voted with their feet have come back. I don't know how many we've actually added on top of that at this stage, but I know that if this club could ever get to the point where it's having sustained success, I don't see any reason why we couldn't pass 25 or 30,000. The fan base is so big out there.
Declan, Dream Bulla can become a top 5 fullback in the NRL this season. Buy, sell, or hold?
I'm going to buy that. So you've got James
Tedesco.
Yes,
I was just thinking off the top of my head, I could think of Walsh, Ponga, Tedesco, Dylan Edwards. They're just decided at the top. It's a pretty hot field.
Yeah, I think he could definitely push for it. I think Tedesco, if he's on the slide, I'm not sure if I would consider him, top 3 at the moment. Yes, he might have a bounce back year, but in terms of origin, I'm not sure his spot is necessarily safe. But I definitely think he could push for it. I mean, look what he did we have to remember as well that he's only recently converted from basketball, so he hasn't really been in that professional, 24/7 rugby league lifestyle for all that long. And we also didn't have the greatest halves last season as well. So hopefully, like the more training he does, I think he could honestly do it. I know that's ambitious for me because, fullback, there's some great fullbacks running around these days, but I think he genuinely could do it next season.
Joel, last one for you. It's one of your pet subjects over the years. Will Shane Richardson, I'll ask for your point of view as well, but try and make it out like you're in Shane Richardson's head. If the club doesn't get any upgrades to these suburban grounds, Shane Richardson may push for a full-time move to ANZ Stadium.
ANZ Stadium, so Allianz, Accor Stadium at Homebush.
Well, whatever that one is at Homebush, that big giant dinosaur of a stadium out there, whatever they call it now, Joel, that stadium. Yeah. He moved south there, and it was, you could argue, it was successful.
Yeah, so the two suburban ground strategy was a Lee and Justin strategy. So as far as I'm concerned, we would be rusted on and welded into that strategy for 2024. But I would suggest that things are open for 2025. And I will go on the record as saying, once again, that we need to be in bigger and more modern venues than Leichhardt and Campbelltown. I love both grounds, but as they currently sit, they are not going to be adequate for where this club hopefully will be in even as short as 18 months. So I wouldn't be surprised.
Joel, don't you think, Joel, that it's flipped a bit though? Like I used to think, even though I didn't agree with that viewpoint, the game seemed to be going that way maybe 10 years ago where every team wanted to move to the big stadiums. But now I watch teams like Cronulla, who are relatively successful. They're playing in 12 and 13K stadiums. And Manly, yes, they got an upgrade to one stand, but they're reasonably successful as well. Like, is it just you just think it's an advantage to be at a bigger stadium, or you can grow your club more?
I don't think that you can compare Cronulla and Manly to the West Tigers in terms of potential and in terms of potential popularity in live crowds. I think our fan base is significantly larger than both of those two teams, which both teams are in geographically interesting and unique places, whereas West Tigers has that potential to be the biggest club in Western Sydney. We just can't seem to get out of our own way, or traditionally haven't been able to. I was driving along the M4. I was on the train coming from the Blue Mountains into the city, and so you go through Penrith and you go through, and I'm thinking to myself, if we're the West Tigers, we should be trying to get a representation and try to make ourselves available to everybody in Western Sydney and really try and take on the Penriths and the Parramatters of the world. And that means being a bigger brand and bigger than our traditional home grounds. I know that Campbelltown has a massive amount of potential, but there doesn't seem to be a push at any point in the near future for a significant upgrade of Campbelltown from the council, from the state government, the federal government. Everybody's tightened up their purses. So I don't think anything other than the centre of excellence at Campbelltown is a realistic option in the next couple of years. Although it would also be good at some point if there is a new stadium built somewhere around, west of Liverpool there, something like that. But hey, that's years and years away. So maybe a move to Accor might be something that is on the agenda. It's a proven winner if you're Shane Richardson, and let's face it, it's more our ground, it's more our home territory than it is South Sydney, and the South fans supported it.
All right, boys, I think that'll do for today. I think, Declan, I'm going to have a couple of lozenges and rest my throat because I'm not used to talking this much with no Gary. I've had to step up and actually go above 100 words tonight. So, Joel, have you got anything for us before we go? We'll obviously try and do maybe another podcast, maybe just after Australia Day before the trials start in mid-Feb.
Now, the only thing I'd like to say is that I really hope that my fellow West Tigers fans can enjoy this year. We talk about being cautiously optimistic. I just want us to have a football team that's actually enjoyable to follow, and a football club that brings us some joy and some fun, because I'm sick of it being so dour and I'm sick of it being so unenjoyable. So I really hope that we get a little bit of sun on our shoulders this year and we can actually enjoy this experience that's coming up.
Let's hope so. All right, boys, thank you. See you next time.
Thank you.